Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. 2, because I'm a fan of punk music. And 3, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough for me right now. Let's get into the interview. Now, before we get into the interview, I'd like to thank Pega for sponsoring the podcast for the coming month. You see, it's almost time for Pega World Inspire, the annual conference from Pegasystems. Join them online for free on May the 4th from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. UK time to learn how the world's most impactful companies are driving digital transformation. They'll have compelling keynotes, demos, and case studies in a highly interactive virtual format. But they're not stopping there, as there will also be a few surprises as well. So go to pegaworld.com to register for free and check out the full agenda. I must say that I've attended the last several Pega Worlds in person and virtually, and I can't recommend it highly enough. So go register today at pegaworld.com. Now, let's get back to the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Derek Wang, who is the founder and CEO of the AI-driven experience analytics platform, Stratified. Hey, Derek, how you doing?
Doing well, Adrian. Glad to be on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Now, for the benefit of our listeners and people that don't do audio but read the highlights instead, can you give us a bit of a thumbnail sketch on you and the work that you do, and yeah, just a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Again, very glad to be on this podcast and really be a fan of you, read the book, and really excited to be on Punk CX. So us at the Stratified, we are a AI platform that combines the experience data and the operational data for any large enterprise to improve their customer and employee experience for the whole organization. Our aim is to leveraging AI to create automation for them so that this way the organization can better serve their customers, better serve their employees, and their greater external workforce all around to improve their brands and company competitions.
Cool. And how long have you been doing that for now?
So funny story about this. I turned into an entrepreneur after years and decades actually in academic. So right. In university, I'm doing this for like 7 years, and then running the company for about 6 years to date.
Nice. So you come from that kind of research, very, very heavy research, academic research background, and then now stepped into the entrepreneurial world.
That's right. Trying to make the research to kind of empower everybody to have the ability to leverage AI to do what we're aiming out to do. So,
yeah, awesome. Now, when we were setting up this conversation, because I was pretty excited about some of the stuff that you could have talked about and the work that you were doing, and we discussed a whole bunch of kind of things. I think that we ended up with on a bit of a mutual rant, on a couple of occasions, which is always quite nice. But one of the things that you mentioned that. The themes that you mentioned that I wanted to explore with you, I mean, you said something around, I think you said it was the people who have the power to make business decisions usually aren't the ones analyzing data. Now that's what you said, but then I also did some research and it said, I looked at the vision of the company. The vision of the company is stated as being to enable everyone, regardless of education, skill, or economic background, the ability to understand the hidden stories in their data. Now, Is that a big problem that you're addressing? It's actually giving people access to the power of this technology, because it's without a doubt there's powerful tech and insight out there, but is the blocker our ability to access that?
It absolutely is the blocker for our ability to access that, right? So at Stratified, what you just said there is our lifelong vision of our company. So
Mm.
this is part of goes into the culture of why we started this and how we're looking at the world. Being in academic for long, I often see there's great models, there are great AI papers being published by my colleagues and students
Mm.
that is in the academic world. However, I rarely see those come into everyday people's life.
Right.
However, on the flip side, from business end, everybody recognize it's important to use AI and it's important to leverage them, but nobody knows how to do so, right? So that's where the rant we had before is the disjoint between people who need to make decisions and the actually appropriate technology for them.
Yeah. Yeah, because it
So
seems to be there's a lot of people that walking around and going like, yeah, we need to be a data-driven decision-making company, and that's like the big rhetoric, right? And then and I think in
yes,
private, many people are turning around and going like, that's brilliant, but I have no idea what that means.
absolutely. And part of this is where we pursue as inside our company as a culture, but also outside how we can live that for the society. One of the things that I'm still very avid, kind of active in is working with the academics to bridge down that gap as well. So one of the funny thing, fun product we are doing, you may find it interesting, is that we start seeing the AI and all this education decision power shouldn't just start one at the college level. So now we're proposed to National Science Foundation to build a AI mixed reality, augmented reality, and VR kind of bus so that we can drive into underrepresented communities and showing the young kids from middle school or high school how those technology and AI can really help them to see their upward mobility. And that's really what I find fascinating for AI for people, is to get them closer, make it simple, and let people start leveraging those in their daily lives.
Nice, I like that. That's awesome, man. That's kind of what a cool project. Um, but I just want to explore the idea around you know, capability, because I remember talking to somebody, and I can't remember which firm they were from, but it was about 6 or 7 years ago, and they were talking about data and analytics and the emergence of a what they were calling a data and analytics skills gap at both an analyst and leadership level. I mean, and that was the industry was going to really suffer that because there wasn't this kind of pull through or flow through of these sort of skills that were coming through. I mean, does that gap still exist? And if so, I mean, how large is it? And is that and how are you trying to? I mean, is this what your kind of technology is trying to do? Trying to solve for that?
You hit the nail on the head, Adrian. I think the gap where you mentioned, it's not only still exists, but also widened in the
Right.
past couple of years, right? So really, where what the cost of those gap is where people think about the educational piece, right? If we're looking at the explosion of data, right? In your
Hmm.
book, you mentioned, hey, there are companies back in 2017 normally use 7 channels of data collection to interact with their customers. Nowadays, it's probably 11 channels. That is actually exploding in terms of how the data get into here, but also what the challenge there is for the analytics. It just, for the sake of complexity, people make it even more complex for others to understand. So the data explosion and the kind of closed gated access to tech, the more complications that put in gap widens the scarcity of the skill sets and the talents that are on the street. So it's even worse right now. And not only just on the analyst level, but even more so on the leadership level, because the AIs, the tech, and the data are not made it simple enough for the leadership to take that and make decisions to it.
Right.
So
So go ahead.
no, I was saying like, and that's where Stratify here, we're trying to address that. In our belief, all the machine learning, AI, or data should be implicit, right?
Uh-huh.
Almost invisible.
Yeah.
So for the analysts and the leadership, what they need to focus on is directions. What they need to focus on is really making decisions on top of that, to be involved of the decision-making process, but not to be involved of understanding what is a topic model or what is a neural network. Those are not important. The importance is relating to the analytic artifacts, combining that into insight that can make a business impact. That's what analysts and leadership need to do. And that requires a very simple yet powerful platform to power those.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about kind of driving outcomes. So ultimately, it's not about the data or about the technology. It's about the outcome, what the data and the technology allow you to do, right? Because
absolutely.
But I think the thing that was interesting is like, what happens? What are the consequences around? Because if I'm sort of thinking out loud here a little bit, but there's no shortage of data and analytical platforms out there. But I guess my question would be is if this skills gap does exist, but there's also this desire to make be data data driven, be able to make data driven decisions, and people don't really understand kind of or have the right level of understanding, or the technology is not helping that or addressing that, then what are the consequences around the utilization of some of these tools and platforms and things?
Yeah, the consequences can be huge, right? It's really like echoing back to a point is it's hard to make complicated things simple, right? If people don't understand how this thing is made, they don't know how to use it. And if they don't know how to use it, the results will lead to biases, right? Different people have different opinions. Then biases will lead into wrong decisions, even detrimental decisions for our organization.
And so I think what's interesting, because it just reminds me of somebody almost like they buy a nice car and it sits outside their house, but they don't have a driver's license. And so it's a bit like you can look out the window and go like, nice car, but I can't drive it, sort of thing. It's almost analogous to that, really.
That is correct. And if they dare to drive it without a license, without education, and then just on the road, we all know what the consequences would that be.
Yeah, danger, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so you also said that the future you envision features the humans and AI working together to build better and to deliver better experience, not only experience programs, but also experience outcomes. So is that, I mean, surely there's just some people that we can go, well, the technology is so powerful, can't we just kind of like set it up onto autopilot and then we'll all head off to the beach? Or kind of like, I mean, why do you think that maintaining and dialing up the human element in business technology, getting that balance right, is essential?
It's a great question. And I think back to your car metaphor, right? It's still human us driving that. And especially when we talk about experience program, only human has the experience. It's human to human, right? So that goes beyond your just customer's experience, but also how is your employees that in a part of this decision making or the building up of their experience program is gonna be key. So all that matters together is that it absolutely will need and require a human and AI working together, because algorithms, they're code. They don't have emotions. They're just execution. But how they execute, it really needs to be designed by that organization, or more explicitly, by the employee of that organization. And their experience really will lead to how their customers are looking at that brand or company at all. So yeah, absolutely need to be integrated between human and AI together.
Yeah, I mean, because it reminds me of I was speaking to a Harvard business professor about a piece of work that he did about experimentation, and he's got a book out called Experimentation Works. And he was telling me about Booking.com, which is a big European sort of travel brand.
Yes.
And he said they have a culture of experimentation where anybody at any point in time can run an experiment on their platform, which is almost like an experiment that's run live. I think it's kind of controlled, kind of like customer set, so it's not like completely site wide, as it were. But I guess it's almost like you're facilitating them to kind of take an idea, to develop a hypothesis, and then set it up and test it, and to actually see how it works. And then it's almost like open learning in many ways.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of almost, it feels like that's kind of what you're sort of aspiring to you want to enable organizations to be able to get to, is almost to be able to go and almost not necessarily seek the answers, but go and actually find out a way or construct a way of generating insight that will kind of deliver some answers.
That is correct. And also to your point, right? So to do the experience program or insights, this is not a snapshot, or this is not a, it's not an ad hoc project. I've
Yeah.
done it and it's done. It's an evolution. It's always improving. And who can always improve on itself right now is it's us human. We learn. We learn from the mistakes, we learn from each other and other companies, and we keep improving that. So that's the synergy where it can, with human in the center driver's seats, that's going to help organization moving forward.
Perfect. But then the other kind of like big elephant in the room with all this, when I was asking about the consequences of this, because one of the big things around, and again, it's a bit like kind of buying an expensive car and not being able to drive, is like it's expensive, right? And a lot of companies are making big investments and not necessarily getting the ROI that they would like, or they're finding it difficult to deliver an ROI. So I mean, I know this is one of your drums that you bang on about, and I'm certainly one of the kind of drums that I bang on. I mean, tell me about ROI. I mean, what do you think about kind of that? Because it feels like the I feel like the conversation about ROI and the need to prove ROI was rising and rising and rising over the course of 2019, and they reached a bit of a crescendo at the end of the year, and then carried over into 2020, and then sort of disappeared as it kind of like got pushed to the side, as the pandemic can hit. But I'm pretty sure it's going to come back with a vengeance. I mean, what do you think the organizations should be doing to ensure that they deliver a clear ROI on their initiatives and investments, and sort of like what they're getting wrong currently?
Yeah, no. So like you and I had a good chat about this, right? Is really, can we put fundamentally the question is, can the ROI, can we put a metrics around your customer experience or your experience program at all? So in my humble opinion, that's the wrong way of thinking about it. For organization, experience is the livelihood of your company.
Right.
That's not, it should be ingrained into every single function of your organization. Like the best company I have seen that we work with, for example, like a Charles Schwab, they integrate their experience in every single function.
Right.
Not an experience department. This is all over a cost, kind of organizational kind of a bang-on decision. Hey, this is the experience. Now, if companies all think that way, ROI, it's natural. It reflects in their top line. It reflects in their bottom line. It reflects into every organization because that's their thing. However, conceptually, to your point, many companies still think about customer experience as an afterthought, right? Hey, we need to improve our customer experience by this hard measurement, say a NPS score or any CSAT score. That doesn't goes well with, in my understanding, is that just a third-party goal that is ad hocly. I can done it in a quarter, I can done it in a year or 2 years, but that's it. That doesn't tell me that organization really think the experience to be part of their organizational livelihood. For example, we touches on employee experience, right? That's part of the experience that company need to take in of saying, we also need to get that in there. How do you measure ROI of that? You measure ROI of that is multitude, right? Involuntary churns, all your customer comments, and all your company top lines. So we have to think about ROI in a broader sense. Is that whether it is the number one ROI is your company and your brand will be long-living thing that even after the CX program. That's the number one ROI you can gain from this.
Yeah. I mean, I always think that that um, like customer kind of like metrics like NPS or CSAT or CES or whatever, or even your own kind of like generated sort of like score is they're useful and they kind of allow you to gauge opinion and gather feedback and everything else and allow you to kind of gauge the mood of your customers. But the as a driver, there's only like they're more correlated with success rather than positively linked to success, if you know what I mean. And I think kind of like
Yes.
what I've been kind of like, encouraging people to do is to say, look, you need to be thinking about how does your program link through to what you're talking about, the kind of the fundamental drivers of your business success, and that is, I guess, in simple terms, your ability to generate interest, your ability to convert that interest into customers, your ability to help them kind of buy from you and make that as easy and simple as possible. Your ability to retain their custom for as long as possible and multiply or increase the number of times that they transact with you over in a given period. And then lastly is how efficient you are in terms of how you kind of operate the business and can you lower the cost to serve? And those are the things that really drive those are the levers that really drive most business outcomes across the piece.
Absolutely. And the CX program, if we have to put them out as one unit that people are looking at it, is the driving force to help organization to think proactively, like
Yeah.
what you're saying, right? That's the driver for help organization become proactive, adjusting and changing things.
Mhm.
And then the fact of that proactiveness will come in as their top line growth and bottom line, the kind of sustainability.
Yeah.
Those are the ROIs.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But if I can go back to the the Charles Schwab example, if I may, is um, yeah, tell me about kind of like that, or can you tell me a little bit more about that, about how they do that? Because if like rather than it being an afterthought or something that's bolted on, you're saying that everything that they do across the whole organization, I guess, like from front office to back office to middle office to I don't know, somebody on their lunch break, everything kind of like the experience runs through their everything that they do, and it's on everybody's radar, as it were. I mean, so is this something they've undergone? uh, a program to, if you like, to get their arms around, or is this just how they're wired?
This is really a evolution from their end. And we're fortunate to witness and support through that channel going into this, right? So one of the key things we have witnessed is that CX is no longer a department. So number one thing from an organizational chart point of view,
Yeah.
CX is an overarching function that goes into different departments, different business units, from back office to front office. That's what they have been really determined. Hey, we need to get the experience throughout the organization.
Right.
That having a culture shift and a process enhancement in this like ordeal, that's the number one thing we have seen there. Then
Right.
that trickles down to each department how they can use that to improve on their own side, right? For example, call center,
Uh-huh.
right? So they're looking at to be proactive listening to what are the general patterns that they can nip in the bud that customer are always not satisfied with. How can they automate that? How can they really to from the foundations understand the root cause of why people are calling and then overhaul that from product, from services, from their processes all together.
Yeah.
Fascinating story how they transform themselves.
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, but can you also? I mean, it'd be useful because we talked about lots of different kind of things. I mean, what I'd like to do, if you can, is like, could you give me say a couple of examples of firms that you say you're working with and that are leveraging your tech and approach over and above kind of Charles Schwab, and tell me a little about what they're doing and how it's benefited them. Because then that sort of it's then again, it's not about the data and the technology; it's all about the outcomes, right? And you're just sort of like facilitating things along the decisions. It just sort of brings everything that we're talking about to life. If you got another couple of examples that you can share, then that would be awesome, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's put an example of a fast food company, right, who is already well respected in their experience program. And
Uh-huh.
when we were kind of engaged with them, that's where pandemic hits, right? For them to quickly change their process and introduce in the ways that they previously managed their experience program. So what we have worked with them and really to give them that. So you mentioned earlier there were 7 channels they're using. Now is even more in the pandemic.
Yeah.
So we actually really helping them to analyzing their mobile apps, their Yelp, their Reddit reviews, their internal messaging, their CSM, their calls, and leveraging the platform, they can quickly identify 2 key gaps in their experience right away. At first, their customers are getting frustrated that although they could pre-order through their mobile apps, their
Uh-huh.
food won't be prepared until they park in their kind of the lots and then checked in. So that defeats the whole purpose of order ahead and pick it up right away, right? And
Right.
that means they have to watch their customer to go through the drive-through faster than the time it took them to wait for their meal. So
Uh,
we help them review that. They start mixing that and changing their order processes just from that channel. But secondarily, with the shift to completely pick up order curbside, customers were noticing that the portion size of the sides, such as fries, are often not as full as they would expect, like in-store experience. They
right.
start complaining about this from multiple channels, Yelp, Reddit, and all that. This is something either the employee or the customer would have caught if the food was delivered on a tray inside the restaurant, but misses now because of the pandemic forced them to do so. So
Right.
after sharing this insights to them, just a couple weeks, the company introduced those changes proactively to those both experiences and clearly address the issues. There's no more complaints about that. So those are the things where you start thinking about proactive versus reactive in the experience program. A
Mm.
platform like ours and the solution can help them realize those insights and more important, let them learn the insights and drive the business impact.
Okay. Perfect. Do you have another one?
Yeah, another one is also very interesting is we have a call center customer. It's an energy call center, right? When the
Uh-huh.
pandemic hits, everybody are forced to go work from home. So they changed their methodology. Instead of routing the calls live to the agents, they actually ask their customers to leave a voicemail, and then leveraging our speech transcription engine and our smart AI to route those voicemails, summarize them into the bite-sized digest, understanding what's the urgency, what are the areas that customers are having questioning or complaints, or really have an urgent matter of power outage, and
Uh-huh.
smartly route that in real time to the proper agents who are comfortably and safely working from home. So that business process that we have helped them to identify is also like there are repeat call rates were actually 400% than what they previously estimated.
Right.
So identifying all those kind of repetitive calls and made it into an automated fashion to either lead the customers to a quick resolution article or having the immediate care packages send it to them via text messages instead of waiting for live agents really please their customers in near real time, and
Right.
also maintaining the health and safety for their employees in this unprecedented time.
Yeah.
All that is powered by our automation pipeline for them.
I love that because like I've heard horror stories about people spending crumbs hours on the phone waiting for service for something. I mean, I got invited to be on the radio the other day. It was a local, well, it was BBC Essex, I think it was. So I can claim I've been on the BBC. Brilliant. Um, and fun fact: the last time I was on the BBC was on Newsnight back in the '90s, but that's a completely different
That's
story.
awesome.
But there was a story that I was commenting on. There was a news story where I well, a customer of a bank in the UK had a bunch of money stolen from their account. And the family, in trying to sort this out, collectively spent 20 hours on the phone trying to get attention and service.
Wow.
And I was a bit like, wow. But what you
Yeah.
and I was saying to them, I said, like, why can't people just do something very simple, like let people leave a message or press a number and ask for a callback or something simple, or even just give them more information about where they are in the queue or so on and so forth. They understand that don't just make people wait so you can work at your convenience, but actually kind of give them kind of even a little bit of what they kind of like need, kind of like, as you say, proactively, so they feel like they're being helped. So I love the idea that energy companies, suffering with a kind of like in a huge amount of demand, but people can leave voicemails that can then get automatically transcribed into text and then kind of like read and understood and routed and everything else, but it would either and can get responded to by automated emails or text messages or care packages or probably even callbacks for particular kind of like issues. But that feels like a very, very smart way of architecting kind of like a very variegated experience, but something that's very responsive and very contextual, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. And all that is credit. We don't take credits about their process change. Again, echoing our earlier comments about Schwab and the organizational initiative, you're bang on, right? It's all from that organization, how they think they want to serve their customer in a safe and more proactive way. We are the enabler. We lead them to that. And I think more of what your leadership and sharing with the folks talking about that will draw more of those proactive and progressive thinking almost.
Yeah, absolutely. But it does take that kind of thing. And maybe there's this, we talked about gaps earlier on. And it's not just a kind of a data and analytics kind of gap, but sometimes there's an almost, it feels like there's an envisioning gap as well. That some people are just kind of almost trying to just exist and they're not really envisioning what they would like the experience to be and then working towards that. It's almost just like adding things as they go. And it also, again, it feels kind of quite proactive and not very sort of strategic.
Absolutely. And that's fundamentally goes back to what we chatted earlier, right? The experience program is an ever evolving progression. It's not a one time we put in there, it's working kind of thing. Those are just technology. Those are not experience programs.
Yeah. So Derek, I mean, thank you for those examples. Then that really brings it to life. I mean, I love the fast kind of food kind of example as well as the energy example, and it's Charles Schwab. I mean, in fact, on the kind of fast food one, it's sort of like it made me think that couldn't you have done a just in time sort of thing where you could have enabled a GPS tracking thing like you get on a say a Deliveroo or Just Eat sort of app, those food delivery apps where you can get like a little map that shows you where the delivery is and do almost invert that internally for the fast food restaurant, so you can then start to prepare as people get close based on miles to travel and so on and so forth. I don't know if they did that, but that to me would feel like kind of like a logical next step.
And you're saying that spot on, Adrian. I think one of the findings, as we talked earlier, that's why we're very emphasized on human driving the tech, right?
Right.
If us human and the business leaders know and knew that was the issue, technology, like what you just mentioned there, is a quick patch into what they can deliver to their customer and improve the experience.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
The challenge is what they don't know, right?
Yeah.
That's always, there are things that in the company's blind side, and that's where our existence as a company stratified to help cover the blind side for them, to quickly show them, here are the things you may not know. Now you do, let's go fix it, improve it, however way you want to see it.
Sure, absolutely. So, Derek, is there, I mean, what I want to do, because I know you're right in the heart of it, I mean, and wanted to get your view on, rather than looking at what's happening kind of now, it's almost like think about what's happening, what's going to happen, what's coming down the track. I mean, where do you think we go from here? I mean, what is the future of experience and service going to look like? And What are the big sort of challenges ahead, do you think? I mean, is it just this kind of skills gap and the understanding and enablement, or is there bigger things down the track that you see coming at us?
Well, in my humble opinion, there's a couple of things. Starting with, I think when people think about experiences, they're one-sided. They only think about this as customer or customer's experience.
Right.
But what I would love to emphasize on is that's not it. The customer experience is a function that, as a result, from your employee experiences. I
Right.
think that has been not to say ignored, right? But that's always become a afterthought on the employee side. And what 2020 showed us is that if you don't have a stable and passionate employee base, forget about your customer experience because it's not going to happen. Give an example, right? Are you expecting a frontline grocery cashier to be putting a happy smile if the organization is not going to take care of her in this pandemic? No, there's no way, right? So I think what the trend going down to the experience side is more looking internally. How can we make our employee, their voice being heard, their concerns being addressed in real time, and as an organization, proactively serve their needs so they can better serve their customers? I think that's going to happen soon.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's like I think something that you and I talked about. It's like you like this because you've come from a computer science background. Is for me, it feels like a mathematical function in many ways, where CX is a function of both EX and OX, and also kind of more the supplier side and the kind of the contractor side, the delivery side of things. So there's like a function of a number of different elements that all need to be brought together to enable the delivery of a better customer's experience.
Absolutely. And fundamentally, as you and I both agreed on, I'm very excited about that vision you have shared is experience program is an ever living thing that should be ingrained in those organizations. It's not an isolated function, right? So all this is really a culture and process shift for the companies for them to embrace.
Yeah. Thank you, Derek. I mean, that's kind of that's awesome. I mean, I think the next thing I want to ask you to do is to because we're sort of in the clouds right now, talking lots about lots of different things, and you know probably as well as I do that there's one of my favorite sayings, an old Confucius saying, which says that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step, right? And this is a journey of 1,000 miles. But actually, sometimes people need kind of insight to understand what's the first step or the second step that they should take. And my kind of like my feeling has always kind of been to ask people is to say, based on your experience and based on the idea that people listening into this are going to want to improve the service or experience that they deliver, where should they start? I mean, what would be your best advice? What should be the first one or two steps that they should take?
That is a great question, right? We just discussed this on a webinar with Faith Adams from Forrester last week as well around it. So really what she shared, some of the insights, maybe intriguing to answer the question is that 60% of the customer experience teams in an organization have not been able to consider how to show their improvement from their CFM vendors, because primarily the customer feedback management vendors focusing on surveys and very few really look into the ROI model. So it's correlation, NPS, whatnot. So I think the first step of correcting this is actually similar thing as Confucius said, look inside your organization, look inside yourself and start identifying where are your customer touch points. That's not going to be one, right? Even within the 2017 reports, now we're about 11, 12 different channels that you're touching your customers. Start from there. Are you seeing clearly what are those channels providing to your customer? For example, one of the, again, great book you wrote about Punk CX. One of the great example is the after, the cruise line holiday like experience from holidays, right?
It's from Virgin, the last impression, the lounge?
Exactly. Starting to think and look inside, do a full inventory assessment almost, right? Are you getting every step of your customer touch point to the degree that to your satisfaction. So that would be step one. Knowing what you don't know is the step one. Starting from there, do a holistic overview of your organization, understanding how many channels you're using, what is the purpose of that channel, but more importantly, ask the question, almost challenge the team is, are those channels talking to each other? Because as you know, if these channels are fragmented, that means your customer experiences are fragmented.
Yeah.
Changing that mindset, looking at that fragmentation and combine and connect them to be a holistic way to improve the CX.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great advice. So Derek, that's sort of all I had, apart from my kind of longitudinal social research that I've been undertaking on the course of these interviews. So before I get to that, is there anything else that you think that we've missed out that you'd like to highlight or add or discuss or rummage around?
So one last thing, I just want to highlight an example of what we talk about. This is actually what people typically think about CX from a very kind of industry driven, like consumer packaging goods or financial services. I want to highlight the fact of that is experience programs exist in any companies and every company. For example, in pharma specifically, right? One of our dear customer is Eli Lilly, a big global pharma. They have been using the patient's experience in driving their communication and even product development for every single line of their drug brands, and seeing how they can better serve and rapidly accelerate their go-to-market from clinical trials to their patient satisfaction, all based upon understanding their experiences along that logistic chain, right? As a traditional industry like pharma, where they have bolted on this progressive and proactive thinking of improving experiences, every industry needs to start thinking like that. Very important.
Absolutely. I think that's spot on. And I think it highlighting, I mean, particularly now, highlighting kind of, patient experiences, is particularly kind of prevalent kind of now, given kind of what we're going through. And then what will happen afterwards, as many people have put off their healthcare needs in the face of this, in the wake of this kind of pandemic. And so patient experience is going to become increasingly important in the next kind of few years. And actually, I want to do a shout out to the Mayo Clinic in the US, who have been pioneering a patient-centered approach to healthcare for decades now. And you just need to search around, and they've got all sorts of materials in and around kind of their website that will kind of tell you everything they need to know about what they do. They are very generous and being very open with some of the stuff that they do. So do check it out if you're interested in that, because I think they are definitely one of the leaders in this patient-led approach.
Absolutely. And I think, to echo your point, is to that progressive thought, right? Put the human in the center. That's where the experience program is about.
Perfect. So Derek, here we get to my piece of social research that I've been doing ever since I published Punk CX, and I've been asking people on the podcast to sort of almost like association kind of questions around what Punk CX means for them. And the first one I've been asking is, what one or two words would you use to describe a Punk approach to customer experience?
That is a great question. In my heart, I think is simplicity, right? If you look at the Punk, it's going back to the origins, be simple, be direct, right? So that's where the CX need to go back into. Simplicity is the key, because when you look at simplicity, that means as an organization, everybody's eyes need to simply focusing on experience programs, your employee, your customer, your external workforce. That is going to be super helpful if companies start thinking that way, is making the experience program simple, but yet ingrained from their whole organization.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you. And the second question is, what company or brand do you think epitomizes that sort of Punk CX ethos?
Yeah, so one of the companies that we really admire and adore is actually called Contact Energy. That's a New Zealand customer of ours who started by improving their customer experience, truly looking into their employee experience first. So their first step is drive their employee experience satisfaction numbers up and then the engagement up. And then subsequently they see huge lift from their
Mm,
customer experience results. So that's, to me, that's a super strong successful story that coming from organization that, again, back to the simplicity and the culture, right? It
mm,
goes from their people operational department to their customer operational department to their back office and all combined. So
mm.
Contact Energy from New Zealand, you can look it up online if you want to read them. I think the leader there, Joe, has a lot of publicity around how she and Matt Bolden from the general manager side to culturally shifted from employee experience first to customer experience, significant improvement in the past couple of years only.
Nice. I love that. I love it kind of like when I find kind of like companies that that people kind of shout out to that I haven't heard of before, because it kind of adds to the lexicon of examples that we can talk about, and it sort of just diversifies kind of like what great looks like. So thank you for that. So
Absolutely.
Gary, that's all I have. And just want to say thanks, man. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your experience. Congratulations on the work that you're doing and the outcomes that you're driving. That's been awesome. So thank you.
My pleasure. And I want to give a shout out back to you, right? It's whenever I talk with you, ever brief or elaborate like today, it got me pumped to go back to do what I do. I think that's what a punk approach to run a company too, right? Get excited, get it done.
Nice one. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Adrian.
Well, that was cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I did, and I always do actually, because I always learn something new when I speak to some of these amazing kind of people. And it's always something new that I can incorporate into my writing, speaking, workshops, and other sort of advisory work that I do. Now, if you're interested in learning about any of that sort of stuff, then you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinscoe.com. One final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or Spotify or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do tune in again soon. All the very best. Cheers. Bye.